This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 840, recorded on Wednesday, September 1st, 2021. What's up with science now? Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your heads with disappearances, discoveries, and just good science news. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. The world is full of secrets, hidden knowledge that life on the planet uses every day to survive. Most life is blissfully unaware that these secrets exist. They rely on them, but at the end of the day, if you make it to the end of the day, why question anything? Humans are a curious case of a life form that does question everything. We want to know all the secrets. Thanks to science, much of the mystery of how life works has actually been revealed. We know so much, rely so much on that knowledge, and survive better the more knowledge we have. And this isn't unique to the modern age. Humans have been curiously unlocking the secrets of the world for hundreds of thousands of years. Even our archaic pre-human ancestors did it. Discovering how to make stone axes with stone tools, building fires for warmth, light, and to cook with, unlocking physical and chemical properties of different materials to make life on Earth more survivable. It is so ingrained in our mental makeup to believe that there are secrets that even when humans are not engaged in science, they tend to believe that there are secrets. Which is why this is so important to teach humans science. Because without science, the secrets that the seekers tend to come to are things like taking, horse heartworm medication to treat viral infections, just as if, for instance, I made up out of the top of my head. When everyone knows the only way to fend off a virus is absolutely, positively listening to This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Dr. Kiki and Blair. And guest today.
Yes, we do. And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, Dr. Patel, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again to talk about all the wondrous science discoveries that we discovered and would like to talk with you about this week. All right, what did I bring for the show tonight? I brought a disappearing bit of debris and maybe discovering where that debris may have gone. I've also got something to talk about your face and your personality and maybe why your friends are your friends. Those are coming up later. And additionally, tonight, we are joined by our special guest, Dr. Alok Patel, host of the Nova Science podcast, Nova Now. He's here to talk with us tonight about the week's stories, and we're going to talk with him about what he does. And it's going to be very exciting. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm not sure if I'm yet cool enough to be a part of this dynamic trio, but let's see.
It's not a high bar.
I can tell. I can tell it's a high bar.
I don't know. It's not a high bar, just a bar that's high enough to lean against and have a nice drink.
There you go.
Science.
That was so reflective. I like it.
All right. What are the stories that we have lined up? Additionally, Justin,
I've got just good news. A new news segment where I just say good news about things.
Oh,
I really like that, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm really hoping that's not sarcastic.
Shush.
Okay.
Shush, Blair.
Yeah,
Don't give away
I knew it.
I've also got a 9,000-year-old beer discovery, cribs for coral, and microbial rain.
Ooh, I'm into the 9,000-year-old beer.
Yes. I don't know if I am actually. I don't know. But yeah, we're going to have to talk about that just a little bit. Blair,
Yes.
what is in the animal corner?
Oh, I have some crafty cockatoos, some cranky cephalopods, and I also have why we should just pay everyone more.
Is this how you ask for a raise, Blair? I feel like
if everybody gets it, I'll get one too. It totally makes sense.
and you get a raise, and you get a raise, and you get a raise. Yes. Okay, well, our stories are lined up, and so is our guest. And as we jump into the show, I would like to remind you that if you have not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. On Twitch, we're at TWIS Science. We're also TWIS Science on Twitter and Instagram. We're on all the podcast directories, Google, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, Radio.com, Amazon, all of them. Our website is twis.org.
TWIS worldwide.
Yeah. I mean, the internet's, man. It's like, allows the reach. Okay, let's dive in. Let's talk about some disappearances. Mysteries are always fun, aren't they? This is one of the reasons we love science. Everything is a mystery, and we're curious about how things work. Okay, have you ever thought about the fact that when our solar system was turning into a solar system, at one point in time,
little baby
solar system, right? Before there were the rocky bodies known as Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, there were different bodies. That Earth was a lava pit. It was a very big, icky place, and then it got impacted by a giant other planet that they melded together, and
then we got a moon out of it.
And we got a moon out of it, but in that process, it wasn't like, oop, blurp, I laid a moon. I mean, it's not like, planetary formation is not that easy, right? So this other body came in, smashed into the Earth, or the proto-Earth, and you had a bunch of debris. A lot of it became the asteroid belt, similar to stuff from Mars and Venus. All of the rocky bodies went into forming the asteroid belt. But not all of the debris is accounted for. They've done calculations to try and figure out the mass of the asteroid belt and where the masses of different things would have gone, should have gone, and they're coming up short. Where did it go? Have you ever thought about that?
I was just going to say, I think it sounds easy how you described it. It's just a bunch of things smashing into each other, and then they're like, something stuck. I was like, I think figuring out the mystery sounds harder than actually forming the planets. Hot take.
Hot take. Mysteries are hard. Well, this disappearing debris, some researchers have just published their paper suggesting that if these situations were happening and it was hot and it was dynamic, well, a lot of that material wouldn't have turned into debris. It would have vaporized. And so these vapors produced from the heat and the pressure of the impacts that were taking place, they would have just floated off, disappeared, bloop, bloop, bloop. Just I'm a gas and here I go, and little solar system.
Kind of a good way to solve an equation.
Losses.
Well, we've got something at the end of this equation that doesn't make sense. Just vaporize it.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do. Make it go away.
Good. It was hot. It was a lot of pressure. They were under a lot of pressure. So, of course, gasification. Alternatively, though, there is another study that is out this week suggesting that a lot of stars that we might find, sun-like stars, could be eating their protoplanets. So planets like the Earth around the galaxy, around the universe, may have been absorbed, eaten by their stars. Their stars might have expanded and pulled them in with their gravitational force, and then no planets. The way they figured this out, they were looking at binary star pairs and looking to see whether or not they were exactly twin-like stars, or whether some of those stars, one of the pair, had a difference, an overabundance of certain metals that wouldn't be present unless they had absorbed rocky planets.
Isn't that like what the sun is supposed to do to our planet? Like eventually the sun's going to expand and just Pac-Man.
Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Wacka, 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 wacka.
But I think it makes sense based on based on the fact that we don't know what the hell is happening in the expanding universe, and people see metals out there, and you make these conjectures based on what we can see and observe around us.
Yeah, so it could have gasified, disappeared, floop, 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 flown away out into the interstellar space, or maybe the debris was eventually eaten up by the sun, but we haven't seen that. Our sun is just normal, doesn't have an overabundance of any metals. So, yeah, this is where we are right now. But knowing what we know about the fact that there are about a third of stars, sun-like stars out there, probably have eaten their planets, we can use this knowledge to figure out where we should not search for life.
The fact that our star isn't that hungry is the reason why we have, the ability to have life on this planet. So maybe to Dr. Kiki's point, like we look for the stars who are not yet ready for happy hour. And we're like, okay, those are the planets that might have a shot to have our alien brothers and sisters.
But I don't know, Justin, we need some good news.
Oh, yes.
Tell
So
us
this
some
is,
good
I
news.
created a new segment because, look, occasionally I pay attention to the listeners of the show. And occasionally it has been, they have let it be known that they want their science, but they do not want to be bummed out by it. And occasionally I have not painted the rosiest pictures. So I'm offering this new segment, Just Good News. This is the Global Ecology Edition. After a 5-year assessment coordinated by Botanic Gardens Conservation International and specialists from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Great news. Many of the world's trees species are not currently threatened with extinction. The study looked at the risks to 58,497 different tree species worldwide. And it found that 30% are found 40% are not under current threat of extinction, with another 7% possibly not threatened, and 21% that they just didn't have enough data for their evaluation. In the report, deforestation rates at an all-time, I'm going to skip that part, chart showing distribution of tree species according to their conservation status. Brazil, tropical Africa, cascading ecosystem. Jeez, yeah, I thought there was good news in here.
Me too.
Oh no, here it is. I found it. Okay, this is the thing that caught my eye, and I was like, aha! This is Jean-Christophe Vai, Director General Fondation Francophonie. This is in France. Messed it up, but it's fine. They're not. It's not being translated into French.
Uh-huh.
This is quoting, tree species that have evolved over millions of years are adapting to climate changes. Aha, great news. And can no longer survive the onslaught of human threats. How short-sighted we are to allow the loss of tree species on which global society is ecologically and economically dependent. If we could only learn to respect trees, undoubtedly many environmental challenges would greatly benefit. But
You know
sadly-
what would benefit is if this good news segment, you read the stories
here it
really
is.
before you actually
Here it
came
is.
to
No,
report
no. Here it
them.
is.
Cherry picking the good
40%,
news.
40% of tree species are not under current threat of extinction.
Right.
Oh,
That's
yes.
been
40%.
the good news.
That's a
And
failing
just-
grade.
Yeah, 40. And then 20% couldn't even be evaluated. I'm like,
All right, okay. So I admit this idea came to me at the last. I read got the email right before the show. I tried to find something. I'll look harder next week.
For some good news. Thank you,
Promise.
Justin. All right, everyone, as we suffer from the bad news of the good news, Blair, do you
Yes.
have some good ideas?
I do, yeah. It
Okay,
turns out, according to science, if you pay people more, they maybe do a better job at their job. Interesting. So this is a Cornell SC Johnson College of Business study. They looked at kind of a natural experiment that took place in Santa Clara County in California. They looked at data for more than 97,000 online reviews of restaurants in the county, because it just so happened in March of 2013, the minimum wage in San Jose rose from $8 to $10, while the wage in the other cities in the county, Cupertino, Los Altos, Milpitas, Mountain View, Palo Alto, Santa Clara, and Sunnyvale, their minimum wage did not go up at all. So they were allowed to have this kind of natural experiment to look at restaurant reviews of restaurants where the minimum wage went up $2 an hour and where it did not. And they were also able to compare chain restaurants to independent and privately owned restaurants. And they found that negative discussion of the courtesy and friendliness of workers decreased with increased wages. This inferred an improvement in service quality, and independently owned restaurants also scored higher that were chain restaurants because they think that it has to do with something about the control of quality and independent choice in how they manage staff, as opposed to the kind of chain structure of this is how it works.
Down.
This is exactly, yes. And so the implication here is that there's a potential positive impact on customer service, not just on the employees themselves, if you raise wages. There's an argument that is had that if you raise minimum wage at restaurants, customers will actually have a worse time because everything will cost more. But that's not what this showed. This showed that really overall, it appears there was a nice kind of trickle up where the employees felt more taken care of, more valued, whatever it was. They cared more about their work. I don't know. Maybe they were able to hire better people. There could be any number of reasons that a higher wage led to a higher customer satisfaction, but it appears to have impacted the quality of the experience. So I thought this was a neat study because it's an excellent it was an opportunity. It was just like this very weird niche change happened in this very small geographic location. So, you know, the clientele were pretty similar across these cities in the county. So there were a lot of variables kind of eliminated so they could really just focus on this one change within this small community.
Right. And down the peninsula and into the San Jose area, it's an expensive area to live. And so if you're working in a restaurant at a minimum wage, you're probably rooming with other people. It's a difficult situation to be able to find affordable housing, to be able to pay all your bills on a minimum wage salary. So when that wage goes up a lot, that affects a lot of those downstream considerations. But yeah, it's interesting. It's also all within that geographic area.
It's nicer to know if you go somewhere, the staff are treated well and they actually enjoy being there and they're not there stressing out about, you know, finances and childcare. And also I like the part about the independent restaurants, because now I'm thinking about going to like Olive Garden versus a mom and pop pizza joint.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, we have a lot of say when it comes to where we spend our money, but it seems like there's even more to be said about kind of the wider spread rules that can be placed on how work is valued. And there's benefit potentially to everyone. So
yeah. I like benefits. What about benefits based on just stepping on your floor? Right? Okay.
I don't understand what you're talking about.
Wait.
What?
By tap dancing?
Could be by tap dancing. Could just be by walking across your hallway to your kitchen. Researchers are designing the sustainable electricity generating flooring of the future out of wood. Now, wood itself usually is not electricity carrying or electricity generating. Its triboelectric properties are very slim in general. However, researchers love to change things about the world, so let engineers have a little go at it. And suddenly you find that your floors, when you walk at them, could actually create electricity. They have created something like a laminate flooring in which they're using a spruce wood, and they've through experiment determined if you cut it a particular way, it produces or it allows more electricity to be generated than if you cut it another way. So cutting it on the length as opposed to through the girth is it affects the triboelectric properties of the spruce wood. And when the wood is treated, and in their abstract they call it functionalizing the wood, when they treat it with certain chemicals, they are able to create a positive and a negative charge that allows two sides of this laminate flooring to come together and into contact every time you take a step.
But,
And in
but
so, produce electricity that could light your
no,
house.
no. Okay, hang on a second.
What do you mean, no, 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 no?
Well, I love the, if that was true, but isn't, the problem physics? Isn't there, a human being on, one of those stationary bikes going full tilt is, barely going to be able to, if even, power a light bulb.
Right. So their wood that they were creating, this laminate flooring, they were able, with just a small piece of wood, a little bit smaller than a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, just stepping on it repeatedly is enough to not provide continuous light bulb illumination, but instantaneous. Every time there's enough electricity to put some juice into an LED and get it to charge.
So I was in Yosemite this past weekend, and one of the cabins had this floor that generated electricity. It wasn't quite this sophisticated, but it looked it looked like tectonic plates. They were metal, and they were on top of something that almost felt like a spring. And just by walking through, it was charging batteries that then were used at night to power the lights in the building. So yeah,
That's
so
amazing.
this is a much more likely application in normal structures. This was probably not ADA. This was, it was very experimental. It was
Somebody built it themselves.
Yeah, it was a demonstration, right, of kind of proof of concept. But yeah, I love this idea. I love the idea of using the natural structure of a building to do what we need it to do.
Right. And part of the design of this hopefully eventual product is that by using wood, it would also be absorbing some of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere, because trees are a carbon sink. So you're able to store carbon dioxide in the flooring material. Additionally, they can make it look warm and inviting, hardwood floors people like to have. And I don't think it would be quite as much of a springy effect as the floor that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so eventually you could imagine the sustainable house of the future having triboelectric flooring that's actually made from wood. I mean, engineered wood, but
I just have fingers crossed that this is produced on such a scale that we get it out to resource poor areas. It's we got these cool innovations, and they're like, hey, I can afford, high tech X, Y, and Z. Or I want to see them in apartment buildings, because that would be hilarious to hear people just pounding at night trying to get lights turned on.
Okay, I need to run my refrigerator. Right. You get your kids to run back and forth down the hallway.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we could go to the playground, or we could just run around the house all day.
Justin, did you have another story here?
I can. Yeah, let's do it. This is a new study finds evidence of beer drinking 9,000 years ago in southern China. And as always, when they find something from the past, they assume it was part of a ritual of some sort to honor the day.
Which you don't. You're like, nope, they probably just liked drinking beer. Is this the interpretation we're going to get?
This is the thing. It's just oh, this looked like ritualistic behavior of some sort. Okay, so is going to a bar? I mean, so is showing up to a bowling alley on a weekly basis to try to get one of those amazing trophies that Blair has back there somewhere. What isn't a ritual thing or something? I don't know. But they don't use it in modern context. They only use it in ancient context, which is why I'm always annoyed by it. However, this is still an amazing story, despite the fact that I'm annoyed by that little. So they found these ancient pots and sort of a huge mound of dirt that was 80 meters by 50 meters, 3 meters above ground level. And it had a trench around it, which is sort of interesting because that very much reminds me of ancient Celtic sites that they find in Britain that are much, much more recent. But this was found in a place called Cockatoo. There was no residential structures on the site, but there were burial mounds that contain burial chambers that contained 2 human skeletons. And they had many, many, many pottery pits with high-quality pottery vessels there. And a lot of them were intact. A lot of them looked like the paint was still good. They were actually pretty amazing. Some had some abstract designs on them. And sort of the side note to the study that's looking at, that it analyzed what the contents might have been, they also think this is some of the earliest known painted pottery on the planet. And pointing out that no pottery of this kind has been found at any other sites dating to this time period. Research team analyzed different types of pottery, different sizes. They found that a lot of the sizes were easily held in one hand, so less likely then to be a storage vessel type of a thing, which then got them to thinking, well, what were they drinking? So they started to analyze what they could of the residue within the vessels. They found microfossil residues of starch. They found residue of fungi. They extracted some stuff from the interior of the pots, put it through these analyzers. And basically everything they found are consistent with the residues for what would be a beer fermentation. The things that are not found naturally in soil or in other artifacts unless they had contained alcohol at some point. 9,000 years ago, rice was also one of the things, along with some sort of tuber, some potato-y type thing, was utilized. Sort of interesting. This is southern China. Southern China is sort of where the revolution of maize or rice, rice took place. 10,000 up to 6,000 years ago, sort of that revolution of agriculture, one of the largest early scales. Founding fundamental pieces of modern civilization. But this at 9,000 years ago is so far back that it wouldn't necessarily have been, this is so early into the domestication of rice that people would have still been hunter-gatherers. Researchers do think, though, they kind of posit something kind of fun, which is that there might be a connection. There might be a correlation between people using rice early on to make alcohol, gathering around and becoming social to make the alcohol, and then like, hey, if we grew like a lot of this, we could make a lot.
We could have socials every night.
We could do this all the time. We wouldn't have to wait till like a ritual thing happened. We could just always have rice. And then it turned out you could eat it too, which turned you could do other stuff with it, and then society formed.
Yeah, it's interesting how long ago it is. I'm wondering, I know that we reported previously also that China has one of its word for cannabis or weed. It goes back thousands and thousands of years as well. So there's a rich history in human cultivation of a variety of crops that are still with us today for entertainment.
I'm also
ritual entertainment.
Ritual. I'm fascinated by the trial and error that probably happened here. Because when I think about fermentation and these guys just getting drunk off random liquids, I'm like, how many times did that go wrong? How many times was it methane? And someone was like, or methanol, and they're like, oh my God, I'm blind. And then the other time they were like, this is awesome. We're lit. Let's go get more rice.
But they do point out like the early stages of the fermentation in the rice. Rice gets a very sweet flavor as it's sort of lightly fermenting, and so it could have been the taste initially, like it's sort of a sweeter, more unique. The sugars are getting unlocked by the enzymes, and maybe that's sort of the initial attraction. And then later on, you let it go a little further, and then you do start to get the alcohol forming. You do start to get the intoxication. There's another reason to like it. And a lot of course the open air has yeast or fungi that can help that fermentation process. But they seem to think in this one that they may have actually cultivated fungi for this, because of the amounts of fungi that were present. They think might have actually been introduced, which is a whole other than
that's like, purposeful. That's not an accident.
Yeah, forget discovering fermentation. Now you got microbiologists out there harvesting spores. Like, okay,
or just having them and growing them in their vessels, their pots, right? And and just be knowing that these pots are good for making these things, that we get these results. My final study for this part of the show is about a paper published on Monday in the journal Nature Communications. Researchers at the McKelvey School of Engineering and Washington University, St. Louis, have used synthetic chemistry to get bacteria to create muscle protein. It's one of 3 muscle proteins. It is a muscle protein called titin. And titin is a big protein, and it's like the biggest protein. And instead of harvesting muscles from animals, they want to harvest muscle from bacteria to make our clothes. We've talked about using spider silk and being able to synthesize silk from spiders to be able to create very strong fibers. But the idea also is that you can have a very strong, resilient fabric produced from a bacterial muscle protein. I mean, it's not muscle protein in bacteria to begin with. They've put the gene to create the muscle protein into the bacteria. And this synthetic muscle could potentially go on to create fibers that could be used for creating stronger shoes, for creating your athletic wear, maybe creating a stronger, more resilient Kevlar. So the idea is to use the innovation of biology to be able to help create the products of our future, to make our future better. Would you wear a t-shirt, your next athletic t-shirt? It's made out of muscle fibers.
That would be a true muscle shirt, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Zing.
I definitely would, except I think
but-
at least for a while, this is going to cost like $5,000 for one t-shirt.
Easy.
It's sure in the beginning, but we all know,
Does it do muscle
bacterial.
stuff? I don't understand why.
It wouldn't be muscle tissue, but you could use the muscle protein to create long fibers, and those fibers could be woven to create a very resilient fabric.
I mean, aside from the obvious cool branding with the fact that it's like bacterial protein, if it had any eco-friendly component, I could see that being like massive marketing. I mean, I have a shirt that's made out of seaweed. I have another sweatshirt made out of recycled ocean plastic. And like you see that in a store and you're like, oh my God, I'm cool. And I can tell people about this and I can post it on Instagram and everyone's like, you're saving the planet. So I think that I'm curious about that. I'm curious about how much it takes, how much energy it takes to create this bacteria, then make the muscle, then create the shirt, then do all that stuff that no one talks about.
Oh, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of This Week in Science this week. If you are enjoying the show, be sure to tell a friend. Today, get them to listen. All right, I want to come on back right now and introduce our guest a little bit more. I want to say a few more things. So I briefly introduced Dr. Patel earlier in this show, but Dr. Patel is a TV producer, host, and physician. He's a correspondent for the Bay Area ABC News, host of the Nova Science podcast, Nova Now, and Parentalogic on PBS, which is a new program. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us today, Alok.
Thank you for having me and for the wonderful introduction. I basically just like to run my mouth. And as long as there's evidence behind what I'm reporting on, I will run my mouth freely.
Let's talk about all the science. But right now, I want to talk about you. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you into medicine and then specializing in pediatrics and then onto television screens? How did that happen?
Because I'm just, in order to avoid this being like a 2-hour TED talk, I'll just be quick with it. So I'm originally from Arizona. I went to medical school at the University of Arizona. Go Wildcats. Bear down for anyone out there who gets that. I did residency in pediatrics. And one of the biggest reasons why I chose pediatrics, I know everyone out there is like, oh, kids are so cute. That's not why. I did for 2 reasons. Number one, the intellectual reason is in children, the differential. So the type of disease, the type of condition that could cause a symptom is really wide. And it's fascinating. So I'll give you an example. If someone called me right now and said, hey, I got a 15-month-old coming to the emergency department and he's breathing heavy. I don't know if it's because of an infection, because of asthma, because of a congenital issue, because of an injury, or because the kid swallowed a Lego, inhaled a Lego, I should say. So there's a lot of, kids aren't going to tell you what's wrong with them. They're not going to point and say it hurts here. And so there's an intellectual curiosity that was met by pediatrics, and I now work as a hospitalist in pediatrics. So I only take care of hospitalized children. Sounds morbid, but children do great, and it's an extremely intellectually challenging and rewarding career. The other reason why is I have a lot of empathy for this population. Obviously, children don't do it to themselves. Children don't choose the zip code that they are born in. They don't choose the situation around them. They don't choose the external influences that push them into a certain path towards living a healthy life. And it's motivation enough for me to get up in the morning and fight for them. That sounds very preachy, like a Hallmark card, but I mean it. And, as far as communication, what's really fascinating is when I guess this isn't fascinating, this is common sense. When I first started in residency, I was idealistic. And I thought everyone out there is going to see the data and they're going to hear what their health professionals tell them and they're going to make the right choices. That is not true. I'm saying this to everyone now and they're like, yeah, we've seen this play out in a terrible fashion during the pandemic. But this is back in 2012, kind of at the spawning of the misinformation machine that is social media. And because of all that, I got really fascinated in journalism. I went to ABC News in New York. I did an internship. The rest is history. And that's how I slowly started to meld a career with being involved in science communication, journalism, and reporting, with still being a hospital-based pediatrician.
So you're into the miscommunication of things, the misunderstanding of things. And what is it, though, that's the communicating of it? What do you want to be able to, why is it important to you to get those messages out?
Well, I kind of rushed when I talked about the fascinating with communication, because yes, I think it is important to teach people how to be a more empowered consumer of knowledge. Like I like what Justin said at the top about like science is our guiding light. I wanted to really be there and help people not only read or listen or watch a funny, engaging story, but also learn something and then learn what to do with that information. Like what's step 2? Like I read this fun BuzzFeed article about the top 10 funniest things from a Disney movie. Cool. What am I going to do with that info? And so I think that's where the next step with health information was, which is what pushed me into it. And I also oftentimes look at the content that I work on. I look at the content I consume and what I wanted to learn. And it's about relatability. It's about telling people about a health story or new guidelines or a new study and speaking to them and communicating to them as if we're sitting in a bar next to each other and we've been friends for our entire life. Like this is the information I got from my mentors, the advice I got from them early on in my career. And that's what motivates me. It's like everyone out there, regardless of what you believe, we all still have something in common. We're curious creatures. We're mammals. Sometimes people go down the wrong path towards BS. Other people go down the path towards evidence-based. And it's all about finding people where they are and trying to meet them there rather than assuming that they're going to like catch up to some mythical land of facts.
Right. There's a study that came out like this week that seems common sense, but it's like, people who feel like they're intuitive about information are more likely to get caught up in misinformation than people who are reflective about that information. And so it's like, but at the same time, you have to realize that these are different types of people and you can't just talk to everybody the same.
But I sort of mentioned it a little bit in the disclaimer, but it's something I truly believe. Like if you look at the people who are into something along the lines of the ancient aliens or any of these other things, they go down a very complicated road of trying to put disparate pieces of information together. It's it's just, oh gosh, if I could give them real data, right? If I could give them some real data to work with, they could actually produce they might actually find something if they were working in an actual data set. But by using makety up data sets, misinformation as the only information that they're feeding off of, that's feeding their brains curiosity, they don't have a chance to do anything but follow that to its maybe predestined conclusion. Maybe it's a planted thing, or maybe it's just something that's even further out of the sphere of what anybody would conceive. Like we've been, again, like you pointed out too, we've been seeing this throughout the pandemic. People looking for an alternate reality to just the data that's right there already.
I think people want answers, and I try to relate to some of my colleagues who are so frustrated by this, like we should be. And I try to make an analogy. I'm like, when's the last time your phone broke on you? Or, your sound machine. I sound like I'm talking from the ancient time, like your vinyl player, your record player, something wasn't working right. Like you want an answer. You want to like hop on Google and I want an answer immediately. It's very difficult to hear I don't know when I call tech support and I'm like, my headphone jack is not working in my laptop. True story. And I was like, give me an answer. And so like I apply that when I think about times I've been in the hospital and I've been taking care of someone with a complex diagnosis and this parent is on Google and they're like, well, this is it right here. I'm like, where'd you find that information from? And it's like some hocus pocus health guru on Instagram. And I'm like, yeah, because this person has an answer for you. You will have to buy their special potion, but like they have an answer. And I think a lot of people fell into that trap during the pandemic. They're like, oh yeah, there's an answer. It's a bioterrorism thing. And yes, there's an answer. I can be cured of all this by ivermectin. Like people just want to jump from point A to point B. And I think the beautiful thing about science is that it teaches you curiosity and it teaches you how to say, I have no idea, but I'm going to figure out how to find out.
Yeah. And there's a bit of having to be comfortable with that uncertainty, which is very hard for the human brain to handle.
Yes. Egotistical doctors, especially.
Your Stanford bio says that you're on the board for the Association for Healthcare Social Media. Tell me about this. This sounds like a fascinating organization. What do they do and why are you interested in helping them?
I love that AHSM is getting a nod. Anyone out there, check us out, ahsm.org. But basically, as a lot of people know, there's a lot of healthcare professionals on social media. And there are people masquerading as healthcare professionals as well. And when we first came together, the founder, Dr. Austin Chang, who's a gastroenterologist in Philadelphia, he brought a bunch of people together from different specialties, different parts of the country, different backgrounds, demographics, and said, hey, we really need to just get together and just talk about what we can do to teach people better practices as health professionals, better things to do on social media, better ways to reach out and connect with people who are consuming this information. But then on the other hand, we wanted to teach people out there how to identify trustworthy sources on social media. So the very first campaign we launched to kind of test the waters out there was hashtag verify. It was this verify health or verify healthcare, one of those hashtags. But the point is the very first campaign we launched, fall 2018, we wanted to show people a way to try to identify the source of information of whose post you're reading.
Who's
look down and look at that person. Yeah. What was that?
Oh, no, I was just who is actually saying this thing that I'm reading?
Exactly. And so, that's how AHSM really started, is trying to just get better information out there, teach healthcare professionals how to make good, engaging, relatable content, but then also create a better consumer and teach people, like, let's fact check what we're reading online and fact check this person. But then it kind of blossomed and we found more healthcare professionals finding creative ways to use social media. Yes, combating misinformation is really important, but so is raising awareness or building a practice or collaborating with other healthcare professionals, with networking. There's also specific things you can do with each platform, because Twitter is very different than Twitch, which is different than Facebook, which is different than Instagram, and very different than TikTok, which is like an alien species.
Whole nother world. Yeah.
And so that's really what we do. And it's been evolving so much. It's been an absolute honor to be with it. We have some really cool collaborations happening. And it's cool just to have like a kind of a place for people to come together. We host these webinars and we've even been taking on some topics. Like, for example, we were talking about racism in healthcare. We were doing that over Zoom last year and having people talk about not only what's actually happening in healthcare, but how healthcare professionals can address it and what we can do to reach out to people who reach out to us on social media.
I think it's so interesting. I'm really glad that there are people working on this, because I feel like science as a whole, medical science, climate science, science as a whole, has been playing catch up with the social media game for 100%. So long. And part of the problem is that as people interested in the legitimacy of science, you have to stay true to reality and facts, and not everyone else on social media has to do that. So you have to kind of tiptoe this line where you engage and you're kind of in the moment, but you also have to be true to the scientific process.
Yes, and so the two things I'll say back to that is the scientific process takes longer than making a false claim on social media. Like, it's very easy. It was very easy for Alex Jones and InfoWars to come out and say, I'm going to sell coronavirus fighting toothpaste. And then all of a sudden that spreads like wildfire and it takes time to catch up. But also, and this is going to be on my hot take number 2 for the podcast, I can't decide if the net benefit of social media has been a good thing or a bad thing for information, because I talk to people out there and they're like, well, it's good because now we can debunk misinformation. I was like, yeah, that was spread by social media.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I think that we're turning the tide. Finally, I think the pandemic has pushed a lot of people to take a step back and say, where is information coming from? But I can't tell you I felt that way from 2010 until 2018, 19.
And I think there were a lot of people in science and also in the health industry, in medicine, who probably were like, is it really my place to be correcting things, to be saying things? I mean, I'm going to be a scientist and I need to work in the lab, or I'm just in the hospital helping people right now. In this social media world, now we realize, especially with the pandemic, that we have to get out in front of people and credibly rebut the misinformation.
I'm
and actually
so
say,
thrilled.
no.
Yes, you said that. Dr. Kiki, I'm like, if people, unless you're watching this on YouTube, you can't see me like fist bumping that comment. But I think there's a lot of scientists out there who, for whatever reason, don't want to get on social media, or they might have imposter syndrome, or they may say like, hey, this isn't my lane. I can't talk about that. And that was another big pillar of our mission statement when we were talking together with HSM, is everyone out there has a place. Everyone out there has a specific passion or a process, or they have their own ability to kind of speak out, raise awareness, and do something on social media, whatever it is, whatever platform it is, whatever they're working on. There is a place for everyone. I think that's kind of been a beautiful thing to watch unfold over the past couple of years.
Absolutely agree with that. One of the things that you're also doing, though, is you're podcasting. And you're working with Nova, which Nova Science Now is this wonderful, wonderful brand going back years. But tell us a bit about the podcast, the Nova Now podcast, and what you're doing there.
Nova Now, the science behind the headlines. That's our tagline. Yeah. So I grew up watching Nova. So I already had a huge affinity for that brand. And what we basically do is it's very similar. I will say we're a similar family as TWIS, where we're looking at what's happening in headlines. We do a deep dive into one story every 2 weeks. We look at what is trending right now on headlines in science. And, it could be everything from the science of fear, which we did last Halloween, to science in the courtroom, which we did last year, to we've done 2 episodes on COVID now. One was related to kind of the development and the manufacturing of the vaccine. We just did one about variants, and it's all over the place. But what's awesome is with each one, we're doing a deep dive and we're interviewing experts. And we're having just a very real conversation, very pointed conversation, so people can understand, like, okay, this is a science topic that's happening out there. What is it? What is it? How does it actually affect me? And for me personally, it feels like I'm stealing money because I'm getting paid to have scientific conversations and learn. I think this is non-disclosure, but the episode dropping this week is about lithium batteries. And I'm sorry, that episode already came out. The episode dropping this week is about reopening schools and, keeping kids safe and what we're really going to do. The last episode was about lithium batteries and how it relates to Biden's infrastructure bill. So super cool. There's something for everyone. I'm plugging myself now, but everyone should check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, our experience on this show also, I think it's a very similar thing where it's like, wait, I get to talk about science? Okay. I get to talk with scientists and learn things every week? Awesome.
Yeah. It's
great.
Play. It's fun. It's great.
Yeah. Lithium batteries, very serious subject, but also can be a lot of fun to learn about the background of that. Reopening schools, that's a bit more serious. But if you were to think about like your most fun that you've had in a project or an episode, what would you say it was?
Whoa, put me on the spot. Now, is this an episode related to Nova Now, or can it be broader?
Well, it could
Nova?
be. Yeah. So if you want to take it to another program, that's awesome. That works as well. But something that just you were like, this was so much fun.
Like you could even be a guest on another show, and that could be the experience that was the most fun you've ever had.
Oh man! So okay. So I'm gonna very rapid fire give you 3.
Ooh.
Okay.
So one thing that we always do on the Nova Now podcast is, this is not related to the 3, by the way. I'm just taking more time. One thing we always do on the Nova Now podcast is I want to make sure that people see a social component to science also. So regarding lithium batteries and electric cars, we talked about equity. We talked about being able to, what do we do in the future to make sure everyone has an electric car? same topic showed up in the education episode. Now, back to your question. 3 quick things off the top of my head, rapid fire. In order to test out and demonstrate the science of lying on April Fool's Day, 2016 with ABC News, we played a poker game with Whoopi Goldberg and had an expert on poker tells with us to actually watch Whoopi play. And then we were like interviewing her, and I was talking to her about hand gestures she was making. That was amazing. That was like science in motion. Then another thing that we did for Nova, we worked on a CRISPR documentary, and I went out to a very, very incredible farm with UC Davis, where there's a CRISPR cow named Cosmo. There was another cow that was in utero, and I did a transrectal ultrasound to check out this cow who was 5 months. This cow who was like 5 months gestational age. So basically, my entire arm. I don't know if anyone here has done a transrectal on a cow before.
Can't say that I have. No.
My entire arm, all the way in.
So is that how it has to be done with a cow? The ultrasound is from the inside? Yeah.
It's from the inside. Yeah, it's crazy because like in humans, you just do it like right below.
Right on the outside. Yeah.
But you have to go inside.
Seems like you could like create I don't know, some sort of other extension of not a real arm that you could.
It's crazy because like
from the outside,
my hand was in there, and the minute I hit like the gut, the large cattle veterinarian was like, now go down. So I went down, and I felt this it felt like a massive water balloon. And he's like, awesome. He's like, you're there right now. And then I felt this like something punching my hand. And he's like, that's the fetus.
That's the
wow.
On the
get out of there.
It was adorable. The last one I'll mention, because I think this might be a segue, but this is proving to people that science is everywhere. We did an episode I mentioned this earlier, about the science of fear. And we talked with a Foley artist, an Emmy award-winning Foley artist, and talked to her about ways you create sounds for horror movies, and walk through like some horror movie scenes and the ways they create sound and how that plays a trick on your brain and how it actually gets you involved in it. And that stuff is so cool to me. So the Halloween episode stood out, the science of fear, and like how we actually want to be immersed in a horror movie. We want to get scared. I want to believe everything in the movie is real. That was just super cool.
I'm terrified.
Yeah. If you ever want to not be afraid during a horror movie, just, put on some comedic music, or,
just play a laugh track every time
play a
somebody
laugh
falls
track.
down.
Exactly. Yeah. Change the tone
it's like
entirely.
Unless it was like ironically laughing, then it could be scary.
All right. So let's go back to the serious subject of COVID, and you brought up the fact that you have an episode coming out this week related to returning kids to school. And as a pediatrician, I'm a parent myself, and I sent my child to school in a space helmet today. And I'm serious about this. I shared pictures on my Facebook of this full head helmet that has HEPA filters and fans, because I don't trust anybody, but I had to send him back to school. So as a pediatrician, what do you think of the effects of COVID-19 on children?
Loaded. So first of all, I respect your son and the Buzz Lightyear getup he's using to keep himself safe. So the COVID-19 has affected children in so many different ways. So in terms of like directly affecting children, we have long debunked what we heard in 2020, where children are, and I'm doing air quotes, immune to the virus. They're not.
No.
They tend to do a little bit better against it for reasons that are currently being debated. But we've seen plenty of kids, unfortunately, hospitalized. That number's only rising, is continuing to rise. I've personally seen kids hospitalized. I've seen kids in the ICU. I've seen kids with the inflammatory condition, MISC. And, right now we don't necessarily know that the Delta variant is more severe than a previous variant, but we do know that at a higher number, you just have more kids who are getting sick. And that's awful. And kids are also under 12 are not eligible to get the vaccine. So the direct effect on kids has been terrible. And we're seeing this happening. We're seeing people spreading this to children. I've taken care of newborns who've had COVID before. It's just, the entire situation is awful. We need to do better in protecting our kids. But we also have to, pause.
I'm so sorry. I just need to pause it there for a second, because I think it went by quick, and it's the Delta variant. We're hearing a lot about it's affecting kids. We've got a bunch of kids in the hospital. There's school kids going to the hospital in great numbers. But you're saying it's not necessarily that the Delta is more severe when a kid encounters it. It's just so
There's
much
more
higher transmissibility.
Correct. So we don't have the, yeah, you're right. We don't have the clear-cut data yet showing that kids are going to get a more severe disease course. But when you have a virus that is as contagious and transmissible as a Delta variant, that can give you 1,000 times more viral load than the Alpha variant, you're going to get more kids infected, especially now that we're reopening and half the country is like anti-mask. It's just more kids are inevitably going to get hit with it. The one thing that doesn't get talked about, and now it is, but it wasn't getting talked about enough, is long hauler COVID, which we have seen in kids. We've seen long hauler COVID in kids and adults who were asymptomatic. They tested positive for whatever reason, maybe from an exposure they got tested, but had no symptoms. And then I'm seeing like varsity basketball players who have chronic knee pain and chest pain. And these kids are like 16 years old. So that's happening as well. But the one thing we can never state is the indirect effect that the pandemic has had on kids as well. A lot of kids out there have lost a parent or lost a guardian or a loved one or a friend. Poverty has stricken a lot of kids across the world. The racial disparity that we've seen happen, kids from communities of color, kids from lower socioeconomic groups have been disproportionately affected. And don't even get me started on what the loss of a school year has done for kids. And, how many more kids we're seeing present to emergency departments with mental illness. Like, we have failed our children of the world we've been failing them for decades, let's be real, but we really dropped the ball in protecting our kids in the past year and a half.
Yeah. And the mental health aspect is something that I think we're going to be seeing the fallout from for probably several years. That's probably something that's going to stick with our kids, similar to the long haul issues, but for different reasons.
And, I guess if there's a silver lining, because there has to be silver linings to things, we need hope. We need good headlines too. It's that there is a lot more awareness, but what we want to see happen from the awareness are points of intervention. So yes, we can tell people all day long, like, there is an increase in mental illness. Here's what to look out for. But healthcare access is also a huge issue. We still also have 30 to 40 million Americans without insurance. And so we just want to make sure that the mental health services are there as well. And that's something that, the White House just announced millions of dollars going into a couple programs for screening, for training, and for mental health intervention. And so hopefully that plays a really big role in what we see in the next couple of years with the hidden mental illness pandemic.
For all of these children that can't be vaccinated yet, who we are forcing to return to school, what about just testing everybody constantly at these schools? I mean, like, we're doing this in all of Hollywood. All those people are getting daily tests.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
yes.
Yep.
Why? I know it's not very productive to ask why not, but what if we did that? Would that be helpful?
Yes. I mean, how could it not be helpful? You're basically identifying positive cases before the positive cases have a chance to turn into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. The story that everyone was talking about this past weekend in Marin County, we had one unvaccinated, unmasked teacher infected 12 other children. Had this teacher tested, gotten a COVID test, and then, stayed home, those kids wouldn't have been infected. Now, is it possible those kids went off and infected others? Totally. And that's how it happened.
Absolutely.
So there's a very strong case for randomly testing and screening unvaccinated teachers and children. So basically everyone under 12, or the 50 to 60% of kids aged 12 to 15 who haven't yet gotten fully vaccinated.
Yeah, and there have been a couple of research studies that have looked into it, and they've done modeling to determine various levels of testing. And from what I've seen, it looks like, if you tested every 3 to 4 days, or even once a week, that would be sufficient. It wouldn't even have to be every day.
It would.
Testing.
And as people can learn, when we drop this episode on the Nova Now podcast, The Science Behind the Headlines, is there's other things schools can do as well that schools should be doing. We obviously, vaccines and masks are of paramount importance, but so is ventilation. Yeah. And, everyone I've talked to out here, schools are doing different things like lunchtime outdoors, staggering classes, all that stuff. All of it is parts of the layers of protection to make sure our kids are back in school in person optimal learning environment, but that they're kept safe.
Yep. As safe
So
as
we'll
possible.
put them outdoors, which in the Central Valley right now means you put them outdoors in 100-degree heat with a hazardous air quality from all the fires. Like there's no
we put them
refuge.
indoors, especially with the air quality, which is such a tragedy right now. And we have air purifiers there.
HEPA air purifiers and
Yeah.
ventilation systems with MERV 13 filters. Yes.
Here's
We do
the
all
thing.
the filtration. We need to keep moving, though. I'm going to wrap this interview up right now, and I have one more big question for you, Alok. If you had a moment to just get people to understand something, give them a message, a health-related, a medical message, a scientific message, what do you really want people to know? What do you want to tell them?
Do I have to keep it related to COVID?
No,
Okay.
you do not.
So
Anything.
this is anything.
Your dream message.
My dream message is that prevention and living a healthy lifestyle, preventing disease, is more accessible and cheaper than actually treating and having this downstream issue when you actually have a debilitating condition. Prevention comes in the form of things like getting sleep, managing your stress, exercising regularly, eating healthy if you can, and things like vaccinations and masks, which are way better than winding up in a crowded hospital and getting a bunch of IV medications. And I wish that everyone out there would just start to prioritize prevention, and not just the consumer, not just the public, but also everyone out there who are making decisions about our healthcare system and doing something better about social determinants of health and making sure everyone in the world has access to ways to actually prevent disease and live healthier, more empowered lifestyles. That was more of like a end preaching note and not necessarily a message, but I'm going to keep it and take it.
I like it. Yeah. I think we can run with that for sure. Thank you for telling us all about your various programs and the things that you're working on. We're going to take a very quick break and come back with Blair's Animal Corner for some animal stories. Thank you for watching TWIS. We hope that you enjoyed this interview. If you are enjoying TWIS every week, week in, week out, please take a moment to head over to twis.org and click on our Patreon link. That'll lead you to our Patreon community where you can join as a supporter at a level of your choice. So $10 a month, $1 a month even, or $1,000 a month, whatever you are able to do. We appreciate your support because you're helping us bring TWIS and bring science and curiosity to more and more people every single week. We really can't do this without you. Thank you for your support. And now it's time for This Week in Science's one and only Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
What you got, Blair?
Oh my goodness. I have a couple of very crafty, salty animal stories tonight. I'm pretty excited. They're both kind of anecdotal, accidental discoveries in the animal kingdom, which is always fun. This first one is from a team of researchers from Australia, Canada, and the US. And they kind of just back in 2015 happened across some octopuses throwing things at other octopuses. They're like, that's very odd.
Well, we've heard about the octopus tool use, and we've heard about the, amazing, interesting skills of octopuses.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we've heard about octopuses punching fish. We've heard of
fish. Yes. The big thing is releasing their ink cloud.
Yes, doing that as well. Absolutely.
So are they throwing shoes or plates? Like what are they throwing and why?
They're in the cases they saw back in 2015, it was mostly silt. So it was basically just like the dirt on the bottom of the ocean that they were kind of just grabbing globs of and throwing at other octopuses. And so they wanted to explore this further and see what was really going on. So they went back to the same site, which is in Jervis Bay off the coast of Australia. There are huge numbers of Sydney octopuses there. And so they were able to make recordings and study them carefully to see what was going on. Turns out, female octopuses were consistently engaging in object throwing. In most cases, that was the silts we were talking about before, sometimes shells, sometimes they moved material around that was in their way, or it looked like they were building a nest. So there were some different types of throwing happening. But in the minority, less often, they actually saw what really looked like clear attempts by females to throw things at a nearby male, most often when he was trying to mate with her. So they would.
So it's taking the reaction to the woo woo, hey baby, and just I'm gonna throw some dirt at you.
Yeah, absolutely not. Not now. Leave me alone.
Not now. What?
Yes. And so they would grab their material, they would hold it under their body, and then they placed the material over their siphon, as you were talking about, Kiki, so that then they could use the siphon to push out that jet of water to kind of propel the item. So it's more than just them throwing it with their tentacles. They actually, they put it in front of the siphon so that it could kind of get slingshotted out from their body. And they they found that the way that they were doing it was different depending on what they were trying to achieve. So when they were throwing things that they were trying to get rid of or redistribute and there weren't males around, they used their two front tentacles. But when there were suitors that were bothering them and they wanted to tell them to scram, they would use their first and second tentacles instead. So it seemed like, at least in their processes, they were picking a different technique, whether they were trying to just get rid of something or if they were trying to tell a male octopus to buzz off. And in one case, which I love, a female actually tossed a shell like a frisbee using one of her tentacles.
Nice.
Yeah. And so and in another case, this is great, a female threw silt at the same male 10 times. He could not catch a hint.
Persistence, though,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Octopus soap opera.
Yes, absolutely. Be gone. And so, in all of these cases of the females throwing things at the males, they did not see any evidence of males retaliating by tossing things back or responding really in any other way than retreat, essentially.
Wow. So this is a female-only behavior, and it's directed at males, and it's basically, I'm not interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I can't wait to see more research on this. I want to know if there are lots of octopus species that throw things, if they have kind of handedness in how they throw, which is wild. As I love it. Give me more.
Just so smart. They're so smart.
So smart. I love cephalopods. They're the gift that keeps on giving. They always have something great to teach us.
Because they have so many arms.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about, let's move on to birds now.
Yes, cockatoos. They have, they're smart. We've talked about cockatoos are smart. They're in the parrot family. And they have been observed in the past using tools. But this also kind of a happenstance. This is a study with Goffin's cockatoos, and they were found to be crafting and utilizing like their very own toolbox, basically sequential tool use. Let me explain what that means. So this happened when there were ecologists working with wild but captive birds in Indonesia. So they would just grab them for a few days and then release them again. He just kind of noticed one of them using a tool in the enclosure in their research facility. So he decided to kind of lean into this and try some new stuff. And so what they provided the birds with papayas and young coconuts, and then they did nothing. There was no tool use, no nothing. They'd play with sticks, they'd bite off twigs. They didn't really use them to eat with. But then one day, the lead researcher noticed fruit on the ground with cockatoo bite marks, but it was not either of the food types that they've been providing, the papayas or the coconuts. They identified this fruit. It was egg-shaped as the fruit of the sea mango tree, and it is about the size of a small avocado. It's toxic to humans, and the fruit contains a reddish pulp, which is surrounded by a hard pit that encases small, nutritious seeds. So it's very layered. And getting to those seeds is really difficult, even for a parrot that has like 10,000 pounds of PSI in their beak. So then they watched in amazement as a male cockatoo bit away the main skin. Okay, great. That's normal parrot stuff. Then grabbed a branch from a tree inside the aviary. With a few quick bites, turned it into a wedge-shaped tool, held the fruit with his left foot, perched on his right, and used his tongue to fit the wedge into the fissure of the pit, pried the pit open. Next, grabbed a splinter, another little piece of wood, crafted it into a sharp, narrow tool, used that to pierce the interior skin, protecting the seeds, and then made a third tool from another bit of wood, biting into the flattened strip that he then used to spoon out the seeds.
So basically, you used a protocol.
Yes.
And ran down that list of order of operation.
Yes.
Wow, that's impressive.
What do I need that's
Very
going
scientific.
to work?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes. So how do they figure this out? Is this something they're born knowing? Is it something they teach each other? Was this a fluke? We don't know. But what we do know is that in this group of, I think it was 15 birds, only 2 males made and used the tools. All the rest of the animals, all the rest of the birds were pretty young. But so if they had some sort of genetic predisposition, you would expect more of them than 2 out of 15 to do it.
At least attempts, right? If it was practice or a simulation of doing it, might emerge.
Like, I'm kind of surprised by the story, Blair, you just told, but at the same time, I'm like, no, birds are legit. I believe it. I believe that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that these sorts of stories always, it gets me, man, is that they say this is the first time any bird has been seen creating and using a set of tools in a specific order. This is a cognitively challenging behavior previously only known to humans, chimpanzees, and capuchin monkeys. And I always kind of go like, yeah, but how close are we looking?
Right. Have we really been paying all that much attention?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even know about this fruit that cockatoos ate that they used tools for. So
is it capuchin? I've always been saying capuchin. Whoops.
It probably both are fine. I don't. But yeah. So in this case, most likely this was an invention. The researchers are positing that it was invented by cockatoos, and then they kind of learn it from each other as they get a little older and a little better with their tool making and stuff. But pretty unexpected, surprising discovery with these guys, that they have this sequential tool use. They kind of make their toolbox and attack a problem.
Surprising, but not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
TWIS can give you all a toolbox of science. We bring you science stories to entertain you and whet your curiosity whistle every single week. If you would like to get one of our t-shirts or sweatshirts, or I just got a beach towel last week and I love it. It's amazing. Head over to twist.org, click on our Zazzle link. All right, Justin, want to tell us a story?
Yeah. Okay. So when it rains, turns out the plants are not just getting water, they might also be getting microbes out of the deal. These rain-born microbes have the opportunity then to become part of the plant's above-ground microbial community, the phyllosphere. This sphere microbes then are being shown to protect plants from disease and other stressors. So usually when we've been talking about the microbiome of plants, we focus on the soil, all the little symbiotic relationships between the microbes there and the roots and how they interact and provide nutrients back and forth. These new findings by scientists at Virginia Tech University suggest that rain might actually be an important global reservoir for plant microbiome. It started actually just with a pretty simple observation. So they were doing microbial observations of tomato plants, some that were grown in the lab and some that were grown outside. They were sort of comparing two, and they found that the outdoor tomato plants, compared to those grown in the lab, had a more diverse microbial load and actually were more successfully colonized by this diversity. So they started with a simple question. Is it actually really, is it being outdoors? Is it the air? Is it rain? Is it soil that's getting pushed up by the... So what they did was they basically created an experiment where they had lab-grown tomatoes that were given rainwater that had been filtered and the water had been sterilized. They used some DI water, totally sterile water that didn't come from the sky. And they concentrated rainwater. They basically took rainwater and built up the microbes that were in that rainwater, because it's still very, very few. It's not densely microbial. So they controlled these outside factors. They ran their experiment and they found that there it was. The ones that were raised up with the microbial, hypermicrobial rainwater not only grew better and looked healthier, but they had a nice diversity of over 100 bacterial taxa that weren't even in the other samples. So it indicated that microbes in rain can successfully colonize and grow on the surface of plants and offer a benefit. Sort of an interesting thing, because we are very much now focused on, especially in the light of global warming, having to maybe move populations of plants and grow certain crops in areas where they may not have been grown before. A lot of focus on bringing with those crops the soil microbe, because that's an integral part of how a plant's survival is dependent upon. What microbes are there for them to interact with. The idea that there's this global reservoir, though, might help explain how plants can move locations historically over time, and can sort of part of their ability to be mobile might be the fact that one of those things that they rely upon is going to rain down from the atmosphere wherever they happen to land.
Yeah,
Really
I mean,
fascinating thing.
we've heard stories before about microbes making their way across the Atlantic in the winds from the Sahara over to the eastern seaboard. And so we know there are microbes in the atmosphere. So of course they would get caught in droplets and rain down and be part probably of this cycle of the water cycle and the microbial and plant cycle. Fascinating.
Yeah, and I think we were talking, was it just last week or the week before, about how much biotech is starting to focus on plant microbiome for agriculture industry. Trying to find ways, because we're going to have a growing population. We need to grow more food on smaller or the same amounts of land. We have all these pressures. We're not going to reinvent some of the things of the past that got us there. Like just freezing food was huge. We'd all be starved to death if you couldn't freeze vegetables.
Right, but there's so much focus on the soil. What do you do if you've got your indoor hydroponics, and how do you make sure that they have the microbes that they're getting when you're not getting the rain from the outside?
And because we've only been studying the soil, maybe there is a hugely beneficial reservoir that could actually be cultivated and sprayed upon plant surface, which is the easy thing to do too. It's much more difficult. There's attempts to combine seeds with a microbial sort of shell so that they have the right things that they need when they start growing. There's ideas about, getting things into the soil itself, but then you're talking about replacing all topsoil and fighting everything else that's there. There's a much more limited field of bacteria that are going to be present in rainwater. And if they're having a beneficial effect, that's a much more direct, efficient way of producing a great outcome in crops if you can cultivate that smaller segment, actually spray it upon the leaves, which is where it wants to be.
Collect rainwater, take it other places, spray it on the crops. Yes, potentially.
And yet another reason we need to pay attention to climate change.
Yes.
Yet another reason we need rain.
Another. And how the change in rain and where water is distributed and how that's going to affect plants. Yeah, for sure. Tell us about corals, Justin.
So this last story, you know what? Oh, I absolutely 100% should have used this for the good news. This should have been the good news story.
It's not too late.
Okay.
Fool me once,
second
Justin.
segment. Second segment of just good news.
The really good news.
The more, this one's actual. The actual good news. So there's two segments. One's the good news, one's the actual good news. There is a project that is showing fantastic success. The Seacorp International Group has developed a technique that is breeding coral in a sustainable, biodiverse way that's able to scale up to do large-scale coral seeding. It's called CRIB, which is the Caribbean. That's not it. Where is the Coral Rearing In Situ Basins, or CRIBs? And basically, they're creating these sort of pond. It looks like sort of like if you threw a tarp down over a pool or a large container. But they're using all natural coral sexual breeding techniques to initiate this. They're not using a whole lot of artificial, there's some that are using electricity, these other sorts of things. They're basically going fundamental. What do these coral need and what can they actually thrive on, depend on? What nutrients do they need there? They're managing to be successful on a large scale to the point where they can deposit these corals down. They will and this is very important, they will self-adhere basically to the seafloor or to other coral installations. As opposed to, there's some versions of attempts at this where human divers have to go down and do a underwater mortaring to get corals to stick. This one is self-adhesive and is able to sexually reproduce after it's left on its own. So again, this is one of those fun facts that has come up on this show that I never would have guessed was a thing in reality until Blair brought it up in one of her stories. That coral produce 50% of the Earth's oxygen. And they're dying.
Yeah.
Which means we're going to lose the thing that makes the thing that keeps us from dying. So this is really good news.
This is good news. I think that the part that's tough for me, though, is that this doesn't fix what's happening from climate change, right? So this is an important way to kind of reduce
Blair,
the impact.
I think you forgot the segment title.
It's a Band-Aid,
it's a Band-Aid.
But it's a good Band-Aid. It's a nice Band-Aid.
The good news is the Band-Aid works. The Band-Aid works. But you can't get Band-Aids to all of the metaphorical
cuts. It's just going to get ripped off painfully by global warming, and you'll still be bleeding and have that pain of having.
I'm just imagining planet Earth as like a mummy right now, covered in all the Band-Aids we're going to be using. Yes, to solve the original problem. Dude, let's do that.
Yes. Since we have a doctor with us, he can truly attest to you don't just work on the symptom, you work on the cause, right? It's like
prevention. Prevention is everything. That's not just, it's not just for medicine and healthcare. We're preventing the symptom of everything, like an overheating computer, a toxic relationship, or killing off the coral reef. We got to prevent it all.
Yes.
Prevent it all, except for making friends. We all should try and make friends. Friends, this is a social glue for our society. We've got family and we've got friends. But how do we decide who is going to be our friend? How do you think you choose your friends?
I put him through a psych eval. That's step
maybe-
one. That's
But
step
maybe
one.
it's more. Maybe it's more than that.
I just have a science binary quiz I run them through. Yes or no.
Yeah, good.
Well, it could be more than just a simple do I like you or not like you? How nice are you? Are you mean? The psychology of it. But what about genetics? Did you know that there is some aspect of our friend choice that is affected by genetics? We are very genetically similar to our friends, which is
What?
interesting. Yes.
Isn't that just
We
because
are
of racism
more
and
genetically
stuff
similar
and
to
not
our
have
friends
anything
than
to
other
do
people.
with
Yeah, there might be a confounding variable here.
yeah.
There are lots. Yes, there are many confounding variables involved here. Researchers investigating friends and social interactions. Michie Kelly, who's an associate professor of anatomy and neurobiology, publishing in Molecular Psychiatry from the University of Maryland School of Medicine, was looking at mice and this interest in a particular kind of mouse that has a genetic difference has been an interest since about graduate school. Working in a pharmaceutical company, she saw that there was a particular mutant mouse, the PDE11 protein mutant. And these PDE11 mutants are more socially withdrawn. They don't want to make friends. They don't want to do anything like that. Thought they were really interesting, wanted to use them as a mouse model of schizophrenia, looked at their hippocampuses, but went on beyond that and started realizing when looking at little colonies of these mice that the PDE11 mutant mice liked to hang out with other PDE11 mutant mice more than they like to hang out with other mice. And it's a common understanding that if you give them the scent of a friend or a stranger, they're going to spend more time investigating the scent of the stranger and trying to learn about that novelty. These PDE11 mice don't want to do that at all. They're not interested. They looked at, in this particular study, a couple of different variations in this mutant. They had a PDE11 knockout mouse that had one of their amino acids changed. So it's just a slight variant, not that different from the PDE11 mutant. The PDE11 mutants wanted to only hang out with the regular PDE11 mutants. They did not want to hang out with the knockouts. The knockouts did not want to hang out with the PDE11 mutants. They only wanted to hang out with other knockouts. They don't know exactly why this is happening or what's going on, but there are Krebs cycle related molecular mechanisms in place in the hippocampus that are activated during these interactions. So there could be some genetic based on an attraction to smell or some other physical factor. We don't know exactly, but it could be that we are genetically drawn to the people we're friends with. It's predetermined who your
Very
friends are,
interesting.
people. Except for all those confounding factors.
So my first reaction is I want to know what the microbiomes of these mice are.
Oh.
There's got to be a signal, right? That's passing beyond the tissues and going into maybe the air and a scent, pheromone or a microbial sense, some sense that may not be cognitively understood, but is triggering.
As a scientifically curious person and as a journalist, I love neuroscience so much because of how much we don't know. And so like how much is possible. And like the minute, Dr. Kiki, the minute you mentioned the hippocampus, like my mind started spinning and I'm like, okay, learning, memory, but then the hippocampus is involved in other parts of our limbic system and emotions and input. And like maybe one little tweak of the Krebs cycle makes you have some type of behavior that we're not cognitively aware of. And
just vibing. You're just vibing.
You're vibing. These two mice are like, hey, we're going to go over to this corner at the same time for some reason we don't know about. And you're like, what up, Bill? Like, how's it going? And you've just formed a friendship. And the knockouts are in the other corner. it's not like they don't like each other, but they bonded and they vibed before, the intermingling. I don't know.
I think the questions that do arise from things like this that are bigger questions related to social psychology and tribalism is how do we, if we are genetically predisposed to self-select and to find those that are more like us genetically, how do we then get past these genetic and psychological limiting factors that, and this is not, necessarily, this is just a more philosophical question, how do we really get past these biological, psychological factors that limit our ability to really become one global tribe?
I'm just shaking my head that it's not happening.
You're like, yeah, no.
This is a leap from a mouse study to like the complexity of human dynamics and culture and racism and
Thank you for calling me out on that.
But that's done all the time. That's like usually most science leaves out the fact that it was a mouse study.
And it's usually male mice also.
This was a mouse study. Usually when they talk about this information, they leave out the fact that it was a mouse study and say scientists discovered that, So, but
there's a great Twitter account called Just Says in Mice that retweets articles and just writes in mice. I love it.
Yeah, perfect.
My final story for the night is in humans, not in mice, but this is another interesting psychological study in which researchers wanted to know what happens when you tell people that two individuals' personalities are similar. Are they recognized as being more morphologically similar? Are their faces seen as being more similar? And their publication in Cognition this last week suggests that yes, if you were to convince somebody that Vladimir Putin and Justin Bieber were very similar in their personalities, people would think them more physically similar, that their faces are more similar.
Power of suggestion?
That's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if it is the power of suggestion or a framing and the way that our psychology works to actually create these connections where there are none. We've talked previously on the show because, going from genetics are going to determine your phenotype, which is how you look and how you present. And we know that there are various phenotypes from around the world. Different genes lead to different facial structures. Those genes could also be involved in personality. So there could be a link between facial shape and personality. But, this also implies that we can wrongly assume that somebody is going to be more friendly than they actually are because we have this link between face and personality. And if you learn that one person is very friendly and wonderful, and you love their personality, and you see somebody else that looks like them, you just go, oh, I'm going to assume that you're friendly and wonderful also, when they may in fact not be. And the converse applies as well, that those personality types can also be applied to the faces and make the faces appear more similar.
I feel like I experienced this growing up in that every time I had a good friend with dark hair and we hung out a lot, people confused us for each other, even when we looked nothing alike. And I feel like it's just your brain makes associations. You try to categorization is like how our brain does stuff, right? So I think that a lot of it is just our brain trying to create shortcuts and categorize.
Well,
people have mistaken me for Sanjay Gupta, so that clearly counts.
Yeah. So absolutely. There's implicit, the whole basis of the implicit bias testing is the idea that we have made connections between things and categorized things in ways that sometimes we're not even aware of. In this, the one that you've got up there, who is that again? Bieber and Putin? That looks like Palpatine.
Justin Bieber and Vladimir Putin.
Okay. If you put an apple and an orange and that's the only thing in frame, they're very similar. Apples and oranges are almost identical. They're both edible. They're both round. They both have enough. You throw a pear in there, and now the orange is just odd man out. It's way farther away than than apple and pear. But so it's also like what you're mixing into this comparison in terms of context and all of the rest.
Yeah, and we do know that the way that we recognize faces is also our face kind of groups all of the features. Our brain groups all the features of the face, and we've shown in group pictures that people are generally thought of as like this generally attractive based on the general attractiveness level of the group. That's why you want to go out with all your friends if you're looking for a date, I guess, because people will think it up levels. It increases your attractiveness to others if
is
you're
that
in a
why
group
all
of
my
attractive
friends,
people.
when they go out, they just leave me? But like, I'll hang out with each of them individually all the time. But then when they go out as a group, I'm always the one. I never get the call.
Right, you're bringing down the group, Justin.
It's also interesting when people say things like that person has kind eyes, or like, someone has RBF, and these like features that you just immediately associate with a personality trait. And then you like try to mimic it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to open my eyes wider and like smile big.
Right.
Some people learn how to make their faces do all sorts of things. We call them actors.
And everyone in the
Or
customer
liars.
service industry
Yes,
in the last 18 months learned how to do all sorts of acting with their eyes while their mouth was closed. They were
Gotta learn how to smize.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you could be genetically predisposed to find your friends, and it could also be that your friends look like your other friends and you like their personalities, even though they're not really nice. I don't know what you should make of all these stories, but I thought they were fun and worth a discussion. But we have done it for our stories for the evening. This has been a lot of fun.
How you questioned whether or not we could all come together and then give a couple of illustrations of why it's not going to happen.
You're welcome.
This is why we need Just Good News. Next week, I promise I will bring an absolutely positive, upbeat, just good news about an otherwise horrendous subject. Don't know what it's going to be.
You'll find something.
The science.
Actual good news.
I'll find something.
Actual good news. We can find it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We do hope that you enjoyed the show. Dr. Patel, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been so great.
Thank you all. I feel so much more empowered right now, and I learned and I had fun. That's the good news, Justin.
Nice.
That is good news. Where can people find you online?
People can find me at Alok Patel MD on social media. That's probably the best place to find me. You can just Google. Send me a DM. Don't send me any hate mail, though. I've been getting a lot of that lately.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry to hear that. No,
the anti-vaxxers are loving. Anti-vaxxers are a loving, compassionate group of people.
I would love to say thank you. Give some shout outs to people who helped the show. Thank you to Fada for your help with show notes and show descriptions. Thank you to Identity4 for recording the show. Thank you to all of our moderators for keeping our chat rooms, our Discords, everything happy and kind and compassionate, because that's what we like in the world and we love to see it. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Rachel, for editing the show and for your assistance. I would also like to thank our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velazar, Ralphie Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tozy, Woody MS, Andre Bissett, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Bagard Shefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Maddie Perrin, Gaurav Sharma, Shubru, Don Mundus, Stephen Alberon, Dale Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, John and Nina Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Kevin Railsback, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Hey Arizona, support Aaron Lieberman for governor, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Mallory Sutter, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Mountain Sloth, Jim Drapeau, Sarah Chavez, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, Brian Condren, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all your support. If any of you would like to support us on Patreon, please head over to twist.org and click the Patreon link. On next week's show,
We will be back 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting from all of the YouTube channels and the Facebook channels and the podcast channels and the TWIS.org live.
Want to listen to us as a podcast? Maybe on a fun road trip while you're doing dishes, working on
How
some
can you
art.
do dishes on a road trip? What are you talking
Just search
about?
for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, you can get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for our newsletter.
You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into the arms of an octopus, placed in front of their siphon, and rocketed to the moon.
Where you will end up on Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from this show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought. And I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Science.